Hey, I'm Decathlon Gamer. Welcome back to F1 Manager 23. This is episode 41. We're in the new season. Things are going well. Sorry about the last episode being delayed by a week. Life happened. I was too busy and I wasn't able to get it edited, rendered, and posted in time, so I just delayed it to the next available time slot. But as we continue on here with the series, our team hub is in really sad shape. We have not done anything with it, refurbishment, for quite some time. It costs 1.2, but an upgrade is just 6.5, so you might as well save the money long term, skip the refurbishment, and go straight into the final upgrade. This is the fifth and final upgrade for the team hub. More importantly, our weekly development for staff, which is currently at just a 48% boost, will jump to a full double, a 100% boost to their regular development. And then outside of the scouting department, that'll make our staff facilities fully upgraded. Our operations are nearly fully upgraded with 2 for hospitality, 1 for the weather center. Car development facilities still has a ways to go, but we're nearly 2/3 of the way through that one, and we do have some condition drop in a few of these, so we're going to want to start addressing that following the particular upgrade we just made. At the moment, after that, we have 16 million, so it shouldn't be too long, a couple race weekends, before we can address the first of whichever one of those we want to hit up on first.
It's wonderful to be back down under for the Australian Grand Prix. We're a stone's throw from the beach here at the Albert Park circuit. It might be party mood in the grandstands, but in the paddock, expectations and tensions are high. Albert Park is a deceptively easy track to learn, but it's just as easy to make a mistake around its walled sections and gravel traps. The street circuit is high downforce and just as heavy on brakes as it is on tyres.
We're definitely starting to break new ground as Flourish qualifies P16 for the race, and Sargent, who put in the fastest Q2 time, fastest FP3 time, will qualify on the front row for the first time in the history of this series. I don't need Sargent to be winning races here. That's too much. That's too much expectation being thrust onto the team. So, if he really is making us that good, I'm probably going to have to back down on driver. But following this race weekend, we're going to nerf the first 2 aspects. We're going to hire new staff, and we're going to see if we can hire a new reserve driver who's the long-term replacement for this second car while training. And then if that doesn't knock us down a peg, then we're going to have to find a driver that's in between quality, because clearly P16 is not good enough. We need to be scoring points. We're not quite there yet, but if we can get somebody who's only just scoring points versus getting podiums, maybe some race wins, I think long term that's going to have a better impact on what that goal is, because obviously we need to kind of transition in a specific direction, and Sargent's starting to get just a bit too good.
The fans here in Melbourne are all set, as are the drivers, heading into 58 laps around Albert Park. And as we look to Logan Sargent, you can see the focus and concentration.
They're in second place on the grid, but that could so easily change in the first few seconds after lights out.
And it looks like we're good to go. Brace yourselves for the Australian Grand Prix. It's lights out and away we go.
And we're racing. I'm already starting to think about trying to nerf things with Sargent, not give them as good of a start. Others around us, most everybody's on the medium to hard one-stop strategy for this. This is, of course, the updated Albert Park with chicanes taken out and a couple other areas impacted as well. With those changes, track is less abrasive, so tires last longer, laps are faster. One thought that I'm having on how to deal with the Sargent being too good scenario. Another way is to just nerf him a little bit more so than what I'm already thinking about doing, right? Staff change, bringing in a new female engineer who is of a very low level comparatively, which means there's not going to be the affinity, and we're not going to have the bonuses, so he's going to have some confidence issues with a weaker base engineer. And then the second thing is take away all of his FP1 situations. That
DRS is currently disabled.
As we're coming up on the end of the lap here for lap 2, we're already running into those issues. Fuel, we're going to have a bit of recovery to do. I did underfuel by 2 laps out here. But after 2 laps, we're going to settle in to P3 and P18. And think about just how fast that went, right? It barely gave an introduction, and we're already a couple laps in. Sargent way up at P3, though, on the podium. Don't need him to be necessarily much higher here. It's just really going to come down to how he runs his race. But a couple things I can do to do that, right? The staff change, giving up the FP1s for a reserve driver, reserve female driver that hopefully we can hire. That's going to help. That alone might not be enough still. Other things that I can do to nerf Sargent a little bit so he doesn't perform quite as well, besides just straight up sabotage like extra pit stops and things of that nature. But other things that I could do is not really manage his race. Just let the AI handle it for the most part. Just put him on cruise control. Let him drive. Don't handle bonuses for overtakes or defending, using the battery up, pushing the engine, pushing the tires. Just run the stint and focus on Florsch, who is finally, thanks to having a good car and partially through the development. I mean, obviously she's made a lot of progress development-wise. She's more than 10 points better than where she started. She has improved her pace. But right now she's running P18, which means she does have vehicles to compete with. So we can give up focusing on the guy at the front of the race and focus on the female at the back end of the race and try to help her gain that 1 position, that 2 positions throughout the race, and just take the emphasis off Sargent. That would nerf him a little bit. That would back him up a little bit. That could make 1 or 2 positions a race difference. The race engineer could make a couple position difference. The giving up the FP1 and not being fully prepared can make a difference. That combination might back him up towards the tail end of points and put him where we need him to be. Meanwhile, while focusing on Florsch, maybe we can get her competing for, 15th, 14th. And with Sargent only up somewhere around 7th or 8th. Narrow the gap between them, and things are going to be better. Meanwhile, we are pulling out of DRS range of Lance Stroll and those behind. So front 3 have pulled away a fair bit, and then Stroll and Bottas, we have a yellow. Multiple cars have crashed. Ocon in the Mercedes. The Aston Martin behind him, trying to make a pass around the outside, and then it looks like he just tried to go for the apex when he was still just in the process of trying to overtake. So looked like he just cut across Ocon, but hey, the angle's a little bit hard to tell. Fuel recovery is happening. We've recovered 2 to 3 tenths already in 4 laps. So that's happening fairly quickly, which would mean it would take maybe 50 laps to recover. No penalties given. Racing incident. 50 laps to go. So we might just make it as Sargent moves ahead of Russell in the Ferrari to P2. Is all over the back of Verstappen, which would be an even easier overtake with DRS to aid us. Porsche is down to last place in the Aston Martin after spinning out. After collecting Ocon, and that moved Florsch up a position. She's ahead of the 2 Alfa Romeos for now in 17th, and Sargent is, in fact, into the race lead. Those on softs are going to be pitting earlier, going to the hards earlier, and ultimately should have less pace. Their pace advantage by now is nearly gone. They'll be slower pretty much the rest of the race here on out. Sargent back down to P2. He's a sitting duck without DRS, but he's running right there in the top 2 and have the chance to pull away. Though the field is fairly bunched up for now. All of the groups are fairly close together, other than Porsche, who by the time he rejoined was a bit off the back. But we are slowly starting to see some field spread here a few laps later on. Florsch gets around some De Vries for P16. Now up on the back of Sonoda. And with Sonoda just over a second, you'd want to kind of push and close that gap. So let's see if we can push and close that gap a little bit. 1.7 down, 1.5 down. Yo-yoing quite a bit, but ultimately gaining some momentum. We got it to 1.4. It was hovering between 1.4. It was hovering between 1.5 and 2, and we started closing that up a little bit. Sonoda with the DRS overtake actually ends up closing up on... No, not closing up. Leclerc pit. Pit window has entered for Sargent. Those on the softs are already into it. We've swapped at the front 3 with Russell on top now of Sargent and then Verstappen. And they've definitely pulled away a bit now. 4 seconds ahead of Stroll and counting. Gap slowly getting larger. But in the last 12 laps, we've only recovered, 5/10? So we are not quite recovering at the pace that I expected us to be, which means we are going to have to lift and coast a little bit at some point, but we're not looking at a serious amount of it. Verstappen falls out of DRS range. Looks like he cooked his tires a little bit. Yeah, he did. He's on the softs, and they are well worn. He's hanging on, but losing pace rapidly right now. Losing ground pretty rapidly to the front. Other than Leclerc, who pit very early and went for softs, by the way. So he's second set of softs. Different strategy for him. We're going to ignore push for a little bit.
Can you bring the pace up, please?
Copy.
Same for Florsch.
Happy to increase pace.
I mean, if the softs haven't even pit yet, why would we need to pit off the mediums just yet? Might as well extend by a lap or two and make our run on the hards that much easier. We're not losing ground on anyone except for now Perez and Gio, so might as well try to eke out some extra pace right now and have extra pace later, as opposed to just simply pitting and calling it a day. Now, if Russell pits, we definitely want to cover that off, because for now, we're not yet ready to nerf Sargent. But if he gets the race win today, it's time to take that football and make it into a nerf. We're already 1 lap post optimal pit time, but that's okay. Like I said, strategy-wise, this makes sense. Maloney both pitting. Took me a second. I was wanting to say Maldonado. I'm like, no. Maloney into the pits. Florsch now has some clean air out front. I think we might want to get her in. Yeah, it's 5 seconds to the next, and those guys are going to be coming out. Ooh, if they're on the mediums, they're going to try to go the distance on mediums. Doesn't seem right. There's more than half a race to go, which means they're going to go either pretty deep on those, but the hards aren't going to have the pace they need to have. Maybe we switch it up and go softs instead. I feel like those around us are trying to make a one-stopper work, but with a totally different set of tires. Backing off. Let's see if we can extend and be faster instead of slower at the end. A couple more laps. Or really take it down to 30%. I mean, if we're past the halfway point. First pit stop of the day. No traffic. I like that part. Russell's on softs, 95%. De Vries, Boucher, Joe. 2.686, not a great stop, but not a bad stop.
Okay, watch the white line on exit.
Florsch will come out in P20, but with a whole lot of cars that need to pit. We do not want to push, let those get up to temperature.
Okay, happy to manage
that's
tyres short
not
term.
going to make it, but that's pushing. That's aggressive the whole way, which is not what we're going to do. It'd be nice if that reevaluates as soon as you're suddenly on standard. Standard, yeah, it's going to degrade a lot. I mean, look. That's calculating what it would have been for 4, so 3 for standard instead of aggressive. Standard instead of aggressive should get to like just below 30% at the finish line. For Sargent, we're just now hitting that 30. Let's go ahead and go back to aggressive.
And feedback on tires when capacity.
And then we will...
Copy. I'm happy to lean more on the tires.
what's this? Oh, that's
Copy.
tire warning. Okay. Use them up now. Sargent from the race lead. We're going to run one more lap. We're already seeing how the strategy with the softs, it's already cutting it close with Florsch. So for Sargent, we'll lean on those mediums a little bit longer. One set of softs left. Definitely will help make this strategy work. They have an extra pit stop to make. They're going to make a 2-stopper today. .559, that's a good stop. It's a good stop, but it also brings us out behind Stroll and Bottas, unfortunately. Bottas will definitely need to pit, but Russell, I'm not sure his softs are going to quite make it to the end. We're a ways behind him and Stroll. Stroll will try to make it to the end. So we're going to have to overtake Stroll. And Russell, that's a 9-second gap. But we're going to have good pace from here. Already Leclerc pits. 20 laps to go. Okay, we've caught up to Bottas. And gone around now. Stroll ahead. Stroll with DRS. Easy overtake. Just like that. We had just gotten up behind him. We're already around him. We are back into P3. Russell has caught Verstappen. He's now going to lose pace until he's able to overtake him. And we're quickly pulling away from Stroll. Can we get him out of DRS range, though? We're just at that mark now, over a second ahead. But he did get DRS there. Kept him at a second. And there. Back to back. You got 4 DRS zones here. It's absurd. But he's out of DRS range, only just. Now, look how fast we're closing up on those front two. Now, guaranteed if they pit, you got them covered off easy because we're talking about a huge deficit that they're going to have by the time they come out. If they don't pit, though, that's going to be another matter. Catching them and then still having something left to overtake them are going to be two very different matters. Florsch, meanwhile, is last place. But she's on the softs that are a bit more worn than the one that Sargent has, but you can already see how much the graph is going in the favor of being okay and making it to the end of the race. Stroll, Gasly, Leclerc, all good to go to the end of the race. I think Florsch might just be, and that means those around her aren't in great shape, and she's now P19. Gio, brand new softs, and you would think anyone pitting at this point would be coming out on softs. Fuel's an issue. Let's go ahead and take care of it with Florsch first. Get her a head start on that, but we will do the same with Sargent. We are in some open air right now. Verstappen might be trying to go the distance on those mediums. Russell is going to be pretty iffy on the softs. Okay, the fuel is recovering pretty fast with the lift and coast. Gio's caught past Florsch while we are doing our lifting and coasting, unfortunately. And, of course, they've got brand new softs that make them a bit faster, but there's Albon now well behind. Alright, slowing things down just a little bit here on lap 50. Russell hanging in there, Verstappen hanging in there. Sargent definitely has more left in his tires than they have, and we have caught Verstappen. We are just behind him with Russell just ahead. You can see they're on track with Leclerc, Stroll, Bottas. Definitely too far behind. Gasly, these guys, Sonoda, there's Zhou, Gio, who's definitely going forward, and Florsch, who's now P17, with others pitting, coming out behind. De Vries just pit. We had already passed De Vries. No way De Vries is going to catch us, which means Florsch is absolutely going to finish ahead of at least a car today. She's only just slightly better off than Zhou, Maloney, Pourchaire, likely to pit. Lap 52. Sargent is up to second. We got around Verstappen. 2 seconds behind the leader now. Nearly a second ahead of Verstappen now. Over a second ahead of Verstappen. Magnussen on brand new tires has caught and passed Florsch. P18, but she's got a good gap to Albon and De Vries, who's a lap down. Sargent no longer gaining on Russell. We've actually lost ground, though we're pulling quickly away from Verstappen. So my guess is we are on our way to a P2 finish. Here are the last few laps. Sargent now positive delta. Florsch still negative, but only slight. And with a big gap behind her, I think she'll be just fine hanging on to P18. But not close enough to anyone around. Zhou's the only other one who's on something used that's going to be going backwards, and I don't think she's gaining on him. She's 9 seconds behind him. She's at 37%, so it makes sense that she's a bit off the pace. Even Sargent is now a bit off the pace, but well ahead of Verstappen, so we're okay there. Leclerc's too far back. Three seconds in the last lap or two. And she begins her final lap as Sargent is about to finish his final lap. Actually did close up on Russell right there at the end. That's a P2. P2 for Sargent. Meanwhile, Florsch up to 17th. Pourchaire has gone backwards. I missed something there. Oh, somebody went a little too deep and has punctured on the final lap of the race.
Russell wins it. First over the line.
Okay, we're at 0-0 now. Let's conserve just for a second, and we'll go aggressive.
Increase, lift and coast.
Yeah, copy.
Trying to stay ahead of Albon here. Hang on to a P17. There we go, positive.
I think we can reduce lift and coast.
Copy.
Kind of watch from behind here, as it's about holding Albon at bay. We lost 2 more seconds. Albon's keeping same pace to the front. So definitely gaining on us now, just 9/10 ahead, and we're about to hit DRS zones. So full attack.
Push to close this gap.
We have a tiny bit of spare fuel now, but one last full DRS sector. We just went around. Joe. Joe did not make it to the end. That's the last full DRS sector right there. And we got DRS.
Okay,
Our flap was open. We went around Joe.
P16.
Oh, that was the start-finish line.
Really solid job.
Dang, I'm watching Sargent. That was the start-finish line. There you go. Whew. Okay. Hey, we gained 2 more positions on the final lap as 2 cars went too deep and punctured. We just hauled off Albin on fresh softs for a P16 for Florsch, which is also where she qualified. So, great result for her. Meanwhile, Sargent also finished right where he qualified in P2. A little too strong, so the nerfing will begin. But, yeah, Florsch finishing ahead of a whole team of cars. Sargent currently P4 in the drivers, and we are 3rd in the constructors, which again is too good. It's too good. I'd love to see us finish P6 behind all these teams. So nerfing begins now. Let's start with the race engineer. First off, there's 2 of them. That's fantastic. But I'm not going to hire both of them immediately because Florsch is just starting to get competitive. We don't want to be nerfing that competitiveness anytime soon. Eventually, as the better race engineer, I want Ava Moore with Florsch, as she's the better driver for now. Down the road, maybe she won't be, but for now, she certainly is. So I think the smarter thing is to go after Palumbo first into that second seat to help her improve that much faster. So a 41 overall rating race engineer who is, I think, the weakest one in the entire field. Oh, yeah. These are the weakest 2 in the entire field. But the pool has not generated new engineers until now. So it's just finally happened. Hopefully they'll take off and get into the 50s pretty soon. But this is what it is. So we're going to propose a contract and bring her in. Car number 2, yes. Contract accepted on the very first offer. So a 5-year deal at $435,000 in salary. That's going to actually save us money long term. And with a 5-year deal, they're locked in. That was only a $10,000 signing bonus. In fact, the cost to break contract with Jago, and especially the cost to break contract with her existing contract, was all more expensive than what we're going to end up paying her. And yeah, we've got almost 5 full years that she's going to be in. So that's one good thing about making this change, is that's going to put a little more money back in our pockets long term. There is that cost, significantly more. It's almost double what we're spending a year. And we're now 80% of the way there on a full female staff, and the availability for the last one is there. James Irwin will continue to help Florsch out probably through the end of this season and maybe to start next season. We will worry about making that other change. Now, when I signed Ido Cohen, he was probably 5 to 6 points better than Florsch was at the time, as one of the weakest drivers we could go out and hire, as in they were the lowest second-year driver in the pool, other than Florsch, but Florsch, you weren't getting that credit at the beginning, as she was a second-year driver. But anyway, in time, they fixed that and made her hireable. We got her in the 3rd year. But Cohen we got earlier than that. She's overtaken Cohen because we never give him time in the seat. So time in the seat's going to be important. But you can still see development-wise, he's at a 64 when he was a 50, 58 or whatever when we brought him on. So it's still helpful. It's still beneficial to get them up to an F1 seat than leaving them down in F3. But let's see if our now second-year F3 driver, now that she's competed at that level, is she hireable? So Tamo Tanaka, a 50 overall, terrible pace. I mean, 34 cornering. Yikes on that part. The braking's okay. Control is okay. She's got a long, long ways to go. She's definitely quite a bit weaker than Florsch was when we brought Florsch on. And just a 50 overall. That is weaker than what Florsch was when we brought her on. But we can get her in and focus on her training. She does have high aggression and is open to negotiation. So yes, now that she's started competing in her second year, she's now eligible. Barely going to pay her more than what she's making down in F3. But the cost to break her contract and the cost to break Cohen's contract is not much. So actually this one's a much cheaper deal for us. But there you go. We have our second female driver. We have all but one staff position filled. All but one driver position filled. We are getting close to the complete objective of the series initially, setup-wise. And the objective is to start winning. Now, Sargent is pretty damn close to making that happen, and you and I both know that if we kept pushing, getting a win would be pretty damn easy. We got to back off a little bit. We don't want to be finishing too high in the standings. We don't want to raise the expectations too much. My goal is to drop us down to P6. We've now nerfed two things. Tanaka is going to start taking over FP1 sessions to level up faster. And this is a good start. We're making progress. Not only are we much more competitive than past seasons, but we're also making progress on that first goal that we had of getting a complete all-female race team. Currently 15 points overall weaker than her counterpart and soon-to-be teammate, maybe next season, but probably more like the season after. I think it's going to take at least one additional year with maybe somebody weaker than Sargent in that second seat, but still slightly better than Florsch, somebody in the low 70s or mid 70s to help with the transition. But for now, the comparison between Tanaka and Florsch is this. 21-point gap in cornering, but Tanaka is better in braking by 8 points. Control, minus 16. Smoothness is minus 43. She'll get there. They normally pick that up really fast. Once they get to F1, they don't get much in that, in F3 or F2 for that matter. Minus 30 in adaptability, minus 6 in overtaking, minus 30 in defending, level on reactions, and minus 13 on accuracy. Development rate, though, is high. Florsch is already down to average, which means she still has a ways to develop, but probably we're talking about like 10 points now left. That's about it. She might only ever get to about a 75, which could be a good test of, getting a 75 into the seat. Can we ever get the car that far ahead of everybody else that a driver that's a 75 overall can win? Well, in last year's game, I did win a championship with Théo Pourchaire when Pourchaire was like a 79 overall. So I did manage to do that. We'll see. We'll see if we can do that sort of thing with Florsch down the road. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a big challenge to keep the car that far ahead of everybody else. Monthly car development report. Always take it with a grain of salt, but still looking good, but not flawless. High-speed cornering is from first down to fourth. DRS effectiveness on top, though. Acceleration, I think, is holding fairly steady in its position at 11th. I think it was maybe 10th before. Top speed has dropped to third from first, so a team has overtaken us in their speed. Brake cooling and engine cooling are 7th each. I think we were something like 6th and 9th, roughly, or 8th and 10th, roughly, before. So that's holding fairly steady, but other teams are making up ground, and I can totally understand why. They have better development options than what we have. But we do have 3 more upgrades on the way coming soon. We still have 16 days to Azerbaijan. I don't know if any of those upgrades are going to be ready for the next race, but this is still going to keep us fairly competitive in the short term. Driver development update for the new month. Now we finally have a reason to actually care about all 3 drivers in this one. Sargent +1 on control and +1 on overtaking. Florsch +2 to braking, love that, and +1 to control. That was her biggest weakness. No longer her biggest weakness. Reactions is a little bit slower, but her general pace is a 55. And for Tanaka, oh yeah, she's been with the team for days, and look at that jump already. Control, smoothness, adaptability, and overtaking all increasing. Only one helping with pace a little bit though. Every year there's going to be at least a change. The game ensures that. It's minor, again, for the coming season, but it's either high-speed downforce changes or low-speed downforce changes, slowing up the cars yet further. We are pretty balanced in what we have, but it's the high speed we're a little bit further behind. Our low speed's a little bit better off, which means I'd rather see the high speed decrease, which we know how to cover off. For the cost of $1 million, we have the option to get a 50% boost to our design center, adding 5 more engineers for 45 days, increasing project capacity, not a big deal there, but bonuses to outcomes, but specifically 5 extra engineers for 45 days, which means projects can get done quite a bit faster. But you know what? We've already got ourselves a good car, and we have upgrades to make that are going to be permanent as opposed to just lasting for 45 days. We're going to go ahead and save $1 million, largely just because right now the car is really freaking good as it is. We made huge progress there. Not that I want to nerf progress on the car so much, but I'd rather use that $1 million for some long-term benefits as opposed to getting that much better in the short term, which were already happening. And really all it's adding is the 5 engineers, which is cutting a week off of our projects over the next 45 days. I'm not opposed to cutting a week off of projects, but for the cost of $1 million, that's a little extreme. We're not going to necessarily get the other benefits, even though there is this small benefit here: 1% bonus, drag reduction, airflow middle, airflow front, airflow sensitivity. But we've already committed to all of our projects. In fact, I just committed to a new project yesterday. There's no tunnel time for the next month, and so that benefit is going to be pretty minimal. So let's just let it go. Well, low speed it is. We were relatively balanced. I think we'll be fine trying to cover that off as well, but it was just us, McLaren, and Alfa Romeo who voted for the high speed losses. It's going to be the low speed losses, so be it.
Greetings from Azerbaijan, where we're back in the country's capital. The spectacular Baku city circuit will take drivers right through the city streets, from the narrow roads of the old town to the wide highway alongside the Caspian Sea, where cars will be fighting wheel to wheel this weekend. Drivers will be battling it out on the streets of the Baku city circuit, a real contradiction of a track. From the long main straight, where the less drag the better, to the tight turns where downforce is a necessity. Teams are going to have to work hard to get that balance right.
I've got 2 new car parts on the car for this race weekend. We have swapped out Tanaka. We're going to see if Simming still keeps Tanaka in the seat. I have yet to swap out any car parts for the year. We'll go ahead and use them for another race here. Might as well before we move on to our second set, as things are functioning just fine and we have more pace than is necessary. And looking at the results screen, my guess is we succeeded in the swap out, and yes, we did. Florsch, P18, Tanaka, P20. So there's a plus 100 to driver development for Tanaka. So this is going to help her level up faster and keep pace a bit with Florsch, at least. With 0 track acclimatization, my expectations for Sargent was pretty low, but he does qualify P4, Flourish 17th. It's a sprint weekend.
Our sprint today sees the drivers take on 17 laps of the Baku City circuit.
Expect to see plenty making the most of Baku's long, wide main straight. That's going to be their best chance to overtake and secure a strong result.
But just who comes out on top when the checkered flag flies? Now's the time for the sprint here in Baku. And it's lights out and away we go.
We have had a top 10 finish in a sprint, but it's not top 10 for scoring, it's top 8. And we have never yet finished in the points in a sprint race. Will today be the day where we buck that trend for the first time? Well, who cares? It's a sprint. So I'm going to go really fast through this thing. Verstappen, Leclerc, Magnussen, Sargent bouncing backwards, Flourish bouncing backwards. We're ahead of the Haas, behind the Alfa Romeos, and Sargent just slipping down the field. We might have to lift and coast, which would be weird because everybody else would have to lift and coast, and they just don't do that normally. To my knowledge, the AI isn't quite smart enough to handle that, but at point 2, I think we're okay with that first 2 laps of pushing. It's just, that's all you get. But Sargent, P8, gets around Sonoda for P7. That's because of the DRS that one of them is continually a sitting duck there. We've gotten away from Ocon, so now it's just between us and Stroll for 6th and 7th. 3 laps to go. Positive delta ensured. Soft tires doing just fine right now. And lap 16. Let's go ahead and just push till the end. Final lap. Verstappen still leads. Sargent has gotten around Stroll, battling Magnussen for P5 right at the end there, and it's gonna we're gonna finish things up here, all over the back of Perez, but it's gonna be a P5 for Sargent. Meanwhile, Flourish still P18 coming down the stretch here, and she can push last straightaway. Can she make forward progress? Not quite. P18 for Flourish. Points for Sargent. It has happened.
P8.
Final checks have been carried. This is what you've been waiting for. It's the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. And it's lights out and away we go.
Went for a big change on the preferred strategy by our analysts. They wanted to do a medium to hard one-stopper. I'm going to go for a soft to medium. Or, in the case of Flourish, reverse, medium to soft one-stopper. A lot faster. Should be a lot faster, but we've got to make sure we settle in here pretty early. And, oh gosh, there we go. Now we settle in for P6 and P18. Here we go. The long haul begins in what's going to be just a fast race, because who cares? We're going to score some points with Sargent, maybe too many. He's not as fast here as at some other tracks, so I guess that's a good thing. We are getting used to some new parts. We've got some more new parts coming. They're going to ultimately make us faster, but today with some used bits versus what's looking like a number of other teams that have started opting for their second set and brand new components that are just a bit faster than what we have at the moment. Well, this is kind of a good place to be because we are saving money. We're saving penalties on the long term, and right now we're still competitive, but less competitive. We've nerfed ourselves a little bit. Now, have we nerfed ourselves in which manner? Did we nerf ourselves because Sargent didn't get as much track acclimatization in, so got less bonuses as a driver? Did we nerf ourselves because we have a weaker crew member who's leading to a lower mentality for Sargent, which is making him slower? Or did we nerf ourselves because of the parts? Or is it just a combination of all three? Probably a combination of all three that's leading us to being in P7, which is exactly where I want us to be instead of at the front of the grid. 7th is going to score you decent points. 7th is going to be competitive. 7th is going to get you 6th in the championship, or 7th in the championship, or 5th in the championship. We'll settle in very quickly. good to go till the end of the race. I think fuel will be just fine. We're already down to 1.8, so it seems like that's going to be easy enough. So cruise mode from here on out. We'll move forward a bit when others pit, but pitting a little bit earlier than some others means it could move backwards in the final laps. Florsch, meanwhile, is P17 and has yet to make her one and only stop of the day. Just 10 seconds behind her teammate, though. We're not used to her being 24 laps into a race and being that close, even though there's a pit stop between them. However, Sargent was on the softs. Florsch has been on the mediums throughout, so less pace to begin with. She has closed the gap a little bit on Sargent, I think. I feel like she's closer than she used to be. Her pace is... Florsch is going to head down pit road from P17, peeling off immediately, getting passed by a couple of drivers. Others have pit. She's definitely not the first, and she is going to come back out in P20 for the time being. But onto the faster soft compound for the remainder of the race. No additional pit stops either in a 2.541, and didn't come out in last place. Actually came out ahead of Albin. That's good. And for now, Sargent is up to P9. Looking at where we're at on this, Albin's on softs, but pit earlier is definitely not going to have as much left. Though as she's getting up to temperature, Albin gets around for now, but we'll easily keep up with them, and we've got a 10% bonus compared to them. Should make us faster down the stretch. Others on the softs have also pitted a bit earlier than her. We're looking at Ocon has yet to pit. Ocon pits, so that moves Sargent up,
turn 1.
and overtaking Signs
debris.
gets him into P7.
Now, we
Maloney
can see what
crashed
happened.
turn 1.
Now, this was on
Typical
the straight.
place. Heavy braking zone. And tight
Unable
corner.
to do anything about that crash, and
Should
that won't
have,
do their confidence any good.
Should have used the runoff area and then looped it around and come back on, but it goes wing into the wall instead. Extra pit stop for Maloney brings him out 7 seconds behind Florsch. 17 laps to go. Fuel at a 1.3. We may have to lift and coast before the end of this, but it won't be much. It would be a pretty easy recovery at that point. But our recovery has been pretty slow. Back on battling with Signs once again. There's a healthy gap ahead of us, and 3 cars battling: Stroll, Signs, and Sargent. Sargent, for now, down to P9, but very capable of getting back up to P7 as we get into the final laps. But again, keeping an eye on that fuel for the time being. Florsch further ahead of Maloney. Multiple cars have crashed. Sargent's involved. Sargent is involved. Into the wall, though. Into the
Now,
wall.
I think this, yes, it's Carlos Sainz. So let's take a look
We
at
were
the
overtaking
Right,
Signs
let's follow
on the
the action
outside,
now at
and
turn
Signs
7.
didn't tuck out of it. Went back in,
Oh, and a fairly substantial.
put us into the wall. Definitely not Sargent's fault, as we were the further ahead. I'm guessing that's going to be called a racing incident, though, as no, Sargent gets a penalty. We had the right to be there. We had the right to the racing line. The late braking BS that is so typical of Red Bull. It's a penalty every time in the rule books. Yet they never get punished for it. The late braking, I'm going to dive up the inside when you're already turning in on the corner because I'm going to forget to brake. It's a terrible excuse. And punishing the other driver. There's 5 fingers. There's one in the middle. If you hide the other 4, that's what I have for signs on that one. 10.398. Pit stop issue. Really? Served the penalty, but it's still showing the penalty. We waited 5 seconds. What the hell? We did nothing. So we have an additional 5-second wing change. That should have been about a 7-second stop. Became a 10-second stop. But we had already waited 5 seconds before we started that, or so I thought. Apparently not. Sargent, not last, P16, but we're not going to score points today. On the lap, it's going to be a Red Bull victory for Verstappen, comfortably ahead of Leclerc. We do get around. No, we don't get around. but we're 7 seconds ahead of DeVries, so that's covered off. We will stay P15, Flourish P19. Maloney got lapped right at the end, so Flourish just barely keeping a lead lap position. Screw that day. Hopefully it's just the front wing that is lost out on that one. No idea how it is the front wing into the wall. He did hit side pod, so I'm assuming underfloor and side pod could be destroyed as well. So extra cost. I don't mind missing out on the points, right? We've done a little too well so far, so missing out on the points is okay. We did get a couple points for the sprint race, so it's all good. It's really all good. Sorry having a bad day in the office. It's not a bad thing for us from time to time, as we don't want him to do too well as it is. Could that have been the confidence? Is that why he couldn't handle a wheel-to-wheel? Was it his fault? Games seem to think so, but the game has been known to be wrong on that. And Sargent seems to always, actually both of our drivers, always get penalized anytime there's a collision, even when it's very, very, very clearly the other driver's fault. This looked like it was a late lunge. That just wasn't happening. Sargent still 4th, picked up 4 points for the weekend. We dropped to 4th in the Constructors, just 7 points. Just look at McLaren picking up 35 this weekend. That drops all the way to 7th. That was unexpected. Good news is, though, we bring in $4 million for the race weekend. I'm happy with that. That definitely helps us go the right direction a little bit faster. That is going to do it for this episode, though. I'm Decathlon Gamer. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Be safe out there. Bye for now.